Hello, how you doing? I'm Craig Parkinson. You are listening to the Two Shot Podcast. Sit yourself down, pop the kettle on. We're going to have a nice old chat. Who's it with this week? I'm going to tell you right now. How the devil are you? Everything good? How was your week? Good. I'm very happy. It's Wednesday night. Everything's been very, very busy for me and producer Griff over the past week and a half, which is why it's the 11th hour. And I'm recording the intro on the 19th floor of a hotel in Belfast. I'm just looking out the window now. It's very beautiful, lots of lights everywhere. And I was going to start the intro with, I always ask you every week how you are, and I was going to tell you a story about something that happened to me this week regarding an Amazon return and an enduring visit to a post office. But I'm not going to tell that story because we're kind of up against it time-wise, but I'll get back to it this week, and it genuinely, it irked me. It irked me. Something else that irked me that's just happened though, so I thought I'd open with this. So I'm in this hotel in Belfast, and I thought, oh God, it's been a hard day. I want a drink, so I rung down to room service and I ordered a pint of lager. I said, what lager do you have? He said this. I said, look, I'll have whatever. It's fine. He said, what about a Clonmel? Clonmel is, and it's here now. I'm just going to taste it for you. It's fine, it's crisp, it's light, it's refreshing, it's exactly what I need at the end of the day. Clonmel lager, so it's a £5, that's £5, no problem. Right, I'll have one of those before I do the intro, perfect, well I'm halfway through it now. And the fella comes up with the lager to the room, knocks on the room door, I open the door.
Dad!
What, I'm recording the intro.
Open the door.
No, it's just me knocking on the glass. Yeah. I know, he's got to be silenced. Anyway, so he knocks on the door, and I sign for it, and I look down, and it's £10, not for the lager, it's £10 to bring the lager up, but £5 for the lager. And look, I'm no stinge bag, don't get me wrong. Credit where credit's due, and I'll pay what's owed, but I think that's kind of extortion. Don't take the piss out of people having a bit of room service. Anyway, I thought £10 was a bit strong. Tell me if you've been in a hotel that charges a bit more than that. Or am I being naive? I don't think that's standard. A £5 maybe is kind of the norm, isn't it? Oh, God. You see, I didn't want to go off on a rant in the intro, and inadvertently and organically, because this has just happened, I've just done it. So I'm very sorry if you listen to this at 7 o'clock on a Thursday morning. There's me ranting about having to pay £10 or actually £15 just for one very nice but very mediocre lager. That's it. So, right, you've got, I think there's another week or two to get your Two Shot Podcast t-shirt designs into us. We're going to tweet another link out with everything that you need. Honestly, you better step up to the mark, because there are some brilliant designs that we've seen so far. Like, really, there was one that I saw today, I think. Was it today? Yesterday. And myself and producer Griff both went, I'd wear that. That is a good t-shirt design. It was very slick. It was very cool. It was very subtle. But look, it can be whatever you want it to be. Just go with what you feel, because you're the one that's going to be wearing it. Certainly if you're the winner, you really are. So, we'll retweet that. And also, I think we're going to put it on the end of the blurb of the podcast. You know, we were right about what the podcast is going to be about and who's with us. There'll be a link there to our Dropbox, so we'll sort that. So check it out, get that sorted, sharpish. Now this week, it's episode 61 with the legend that is Marc Riley. Now, being the age I am, I'm 42, if you must know. Cheeky bugger. I grew up not knowing who Marc Riley was, but I certainly knew who a fella called Lard was on the radio, and it was the Marc and Lard show, and they were brilliant. And I'm trying to think, I think it was the first northern people I heard on the radio who really kind of spoke to me and played fantastic music. And now I'm a massive fan of Marc Riley on his Six Music show, Monday to Thursday, 7 till 9. Check it out. So we went to Manchester. Our lovely friends at ZIFERBLAT on Edge Street put us up, and we sat down with Marc and we spoke all things music, the fall, himself, and not having a plan. This is episode 61 of the Two Shot Podcast with the fantastic Marc Riley. Enjoy, and I'll see you at the end. I was thinking about you, and I was about all the different types of stuff you've done throughout your career. Was there ever a plan?
A plan?
Yeah, you know, because when you're a kid, you go, right, I know I want to be an astronaut. I'm just going to try and find out how I can be an astronaut.
No, never a plan. I mean, the problem with me is that I am so unacademic, if that's a word, and therein lies the proof. Yeah, I hated school. The only thing that got me through school really was my mates, you know. And I found a kindred spirit. I already had my best mate, which was Steve Hanley.
Yeah.
But he was a couple of years older than me. And so we went to the same school, St. Greg's in Ardwick, over by the Apollo.
Yeah.
I had a kindred spirit in a guy called Craig Scanlon. And we'd both seen Bowie on Top of the Pops doing Starman. I think we'd both seen Bowie doing Starman on Liftoff as well, another programme, a Granada programme. And so me and Craig kind of bonded, and then we just used to go to gigs all the time, and that's kind of all that got us through, really. I mean,
just the camaraderie and the music.
It was just that. It was just music completely. And I mean, I would like to be able to say that I just turned me back on academia, but I had no choice.
It turned its back on
me, yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
You know, but know your limitations. But the thing is that obviously I saw Bowie on Lift Off with Aisha, and I just thought I'm not interested in anything else. But of course, you don't think, particularly if you look at the rock stars of that era, you know, you look at Bowie and you look at Mark Bolan, and then as you become a bit more educated through those people, you find Iggy Pop and the Stooges and Lou Reed. You don't ever think, I'm going to be doing something a little bit like that. You think, right, I'm just going to go and watch these bands for the rest of my life and have no money. Whereas the realism is that you actually join a band and you don't have any money. But
And is that, then you three, is that right, you three, did you form a band?
we formed a band, yeah.
Was it the Sirens?
Yeah, the Sirens eventually. There was a funny diversion before that and it was particularly myself and Craig. And I don't know why. It was ill-conceived from start to finish, really, but we decided to form a band. So it would have probably been about 1975.
Right.
But it was a two-piece band because Steve couldn't play anything at that point in time. Steve got a bass a little bit further down the line.
And what were you playing?
Guitar.
Had you learned to play guitar yourself, or were you having? Yeah, pretty much.
But badly.
Right.
I mean, I only knew a few chords, and Craig was pretty much on the same level as I was. We just bought guitars, learnt all the open chords, but we decided for some reason, because we'd gone from Bowie and stayed with Bowie, but we also went on a kind of prog tip as well, and we loved Genesis particularly.
The early stuff.
Yeah, with Gabriel.
Yeah.
And we've been to see the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, and, you know, we had all that written all over our army bags. Bowie, Lou Reed, Genesis, Pink Floyd, whatever.
This is my army.
All that.
Yeah.
And so rather than trying to be a little bit like the Spiders, which is just rock and roll and bar chords, I mean, genius, but manageable, we decided to form a two-piece prog band. With two guys who couldn't play. So that really, we did fall at the first hurdle. And I remember we had one song that we just used to play over and over again in the shed at my folks' house. And it was called Coming Up for Air. which was a George Orwell reference. So, and it was just this very, very simplistic riff going over and over again. And I think the lyrics were coming up for air, but there's nobody there, which doesn't even make sense, really, does it? so, mind you, a lot of the Genesis stuff didn't make sense anyway. So that bit held up. But yeah, and it was then that we used to, at the same time, because we were mad on Bowie, we used to go and see a band called Slaughter and the Dogs.
Right.
Who were a Wythenshawe band, and we were from Wythenshawe. And they used to play the youth clubs and pubs and stuff, you know, and they used to do Bowie cover versions. And we used to see them at Mick Ronson gigs and Mike Rossi, the guitarist, and stuff. So we got to know them a little bit, and we found out they were doing a gig in Manchester at the Leicester Free Trade Hall, which was the second of the two legendary Pistols gigs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we, all three of us went to go and see Slaughter and the Dogs. So we got there for the first band, who were also the promoters, which was Buzzcocks.
Right.
I think it was Buzzcocks' first gig, but they were actually the promoters as well. They'd seen the Pistols and brought them back to Manchester for the second time.
Yeah.
And we watched Buzzcocks, didn't quite know what to make of it. And then we saw Slaughter and the Dogs. We knew exactly what to make of it.
Yeah.
And then the Pistols came on. We didn't know what to make of it. So we went for some chips at that point.
Have a debrief.
Yeah. we were hungry. You know, what can I say? So we went out and bought some chips and went back and then saw the last quarter of an hour of the Pistols and the fight at the end, which was between the Slaughter and the Dogs fans and the Pistols fans. And it turns out that Smithy, Mark Smith, and Martin Brahma were amongst the North Manchester lot who were on the side of the Pistols, and we were on the side of the Slaughter and the Dogs Wythenshawe Boot Boys. But we were on the little balcony upstairs, so we didn't get involved in any turmoil. Just watching chips, just watching it all kick off down below. But that was kind of the catalyst, really. Then it kind of sunk in exactly what was going on with punk, you know. So we formed a band called the Sirens, which.
That was you, Craig, and Steve.
And Steve, yeah. So Steve bought a bass, and it was more like Buzzcocks than anything. It was kind of power pop, really.
Yeah.
And we did one gig at Pips in Manchester, which is part of the Corn Exchange, actually, now. And that we used to go there because they had a Bowie, it was a great idea. They had a Bowie room, they had a Roxy music room, they had a soul room. So you could just go and listen to Bowie all night if you wanted. You know, you just took your pick. It was a brilliant idea. I don't know why people don't still do it. But we got our only gig there and we didn't have any transport. So we went in a herd of taxis and a herd of taxis coming back as well. It was just a nightmare. And we used to rehearse at the church hall, which was around about a 10-minute walk from Steve Hanley's house where we kept the gear. But again, we had no transport, so we would just walk back and forth for about an hour
with the gear,
carrying amps and drums and everything, and then back again. We'd only have an hour to rehearse, and the vicar charged us a £5, which was extortion. So we didn't do anything the right way, really. And the only claim to fame from the Sirens, really, was the fact that John, the postman, who was this legendary character who would get up and do Louie Louie at the end of all of the gigs. If John the Postman got up at the end of your gig, you'd arrived. Yeah. The truth is, I think that John just went to every single gig and got up. Yeah, I mean, he was just desperate. There's a really great photograph of Buzzcocks. I think it might have been Linda Sterling who took it. I'm not 100% sure. Linda, who did the Buzzcocks artwork earlier on. But it's a great picture of... it's a band playing, I think it is Buzzcocks, at the Electric Circus, and there's about 12 people in the audience, and there's one guy stood there with his head down with a blue windjammer on, with plain air guitar and half-mast jeans, and you know, just immediately, you know from the back even that is John the Postman, because that's what you would see at every single gig that you went to. John playing air guitar, banging his head back and forth, just waiting for the band to go off so that he could jump on stage with his mates and pick up and do Louie Louie, which is 3 chords, and you know. So that was our claim to fame. And it was whilst in the Sirens that I think it might have been opening for Wayne County in the Electric Chairs.
Right, yeah.
It could have been Penetration. It was definitely one or the other at Rafters, but it was me and Craig actually who saw The Fall. And we were just really taken with them, you know. And I went off and made a Fall T-shirt. And so that Smithy saw that another night at Rafters and just asked me to be the roadie.
Oh, did he straight away?
He just recognised cheap labour.
He's good for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd nailed my colours to the mast, you know. I think there'd only been one other fall T-shirt in the world at that point in time,
right,
which belonged to the drummer, so that doesn't count. That was self-promotion.
Yeah.
So I think I did have the first fall T-shirt in the world, and it got me the job as a roadie, which was the kind of catalyst for everything else, really. So that in itself, you know, I mean, probably the most pivotal moment in my life really was going into the back garden. I can't remember what happened last week, but I can remember what happened in the garden in 1977, early 78 maybe. But I went out and really crudely did a stencil with the fall, got a cap sleeve T-shirt, a spray paint, put it on there. And if I hadn't done that, you know, I haven't got a clue as to what I'd be doing now, because that was the kind of trigger that you could go back to Bowie, you know, but that was probably the first real catalyst. But for an actual kind of physical, life-changing moment, it's got to have been that, because if that didn't happen, then I probably wouldn't have joined the fall, and then probably all the other things that came after it wouldn't have happened either.
Yeah. And this might sound silly or ignorant, but around that time in the 70s, were band T-shirts like a thing? Because obviously, when I grew up, they were a massive thing. But around then, were they?
Well, yeah, you would go to a John Cale gig and buy a shirt, you know. But they weren't. I'd tell you what the thing was really. Obviously the Clash and the Jam, and Buzzcocks, they all had these homemade shirts. And so it was kind of, it was a done thing. Yeah. It was something that was happening, and it was all
nowhere near as popular as like what it came to be.
Oh no, nothing like that at all. No.
So how was life on the road as being a roadie?
You know, I mean, it was quite often doing support slots, you know, for people like Susie and the Banshees and stuff. But there wasn't much gear. They were my favourite band in the world. You know, I mean, really. And so it was an absolute gift for me. Yeah. You know, and
so it certainly didn't seem like work.
Well, it wasn't, and I didn't get paid for it, you know. But then again, they didn't get paid for it either, you know. No. It was all real nuts and bolts stuff, you know. And I do remember the day that my joining the band came about, really, because they're on the way to do a peel session. And the bass player at the time, a guy called Eric Ferret, who...
Eric Ferret?
Yeah. He's got another real name.
Please stick with Eric Ferret.
Yeah, that'll do it, won't it? But he was a mate of John Cooper Clarke's, and he'd played in bands with John previously.
Yeah.
And he was older than everybody else. And I think that he was getting a little bit tired of what was going on in the band. You know, Mark was kind of taking control. I do remember being the roadie in the back of the van with the guys, and then we went to his house in Prestwich, and he opened up the back of the van, and he says, "I'm not playing in any fucking band with bongos," and he shut the door and went back in. And what it was, and again, I don't know if it was a financial kind of sleight of hand, but Smithy had booked a guy called Steve Davis in to come and augment the fall on bongos,
right?
Congas, actually. And the more people that played on a peel session, the more money you got.
Oh, really?
So I don't know if that was the motive or whether it was more creative. I've got my suspicions.
Yeah.
Put it that way. But as a result, Eric just slammed the door and went back into his house. And this was for the first peel session. So we just forged on up the M6, and Martin Brahma played all the bass parts, and he wrote the lion's share of the music anyway. It was about a couple of weeks after that, they'd been having to think about who would be the new bass player, and I got offered the job.
And how were your bass skills at the time?
Minimal. In fact, you know, it is, and it's a very, very kind of prescient point, really, because I believe that Carl Burns, who was an amazing drummer, probably still is, he was in the band at the time, and Martin Brahma, again, great guitarist, they were great mates with this lad called Paddy Garvey, who apparently was a great bass player. But regardless of the fact that both of those wanted Paddy Garvey in the band, Mark wanted me in the band, probably because I was a very flexible, malleable 16-year-old who was
Oh,
kind of
you were
in awe of
16
it.
at the time?
Yeah.
Shit, I didn't know you were that young.
Yeah, so I think Mark saw me as something that he could bend into shape and probably wouldn't give any back chat, whereas Carl and Martin particularly, were his peers. You know, they were mates from before the fall, and they were founder members as well.
Yeah.
But he wasn't having it, and so Steve Garvey, then went on to join Buzzcocks and proved himself to be one of the best bass players around, you know, so there's no doubt that Steve Garvey should have got the job. I'm sure he's glad he didn't, ultimately. That kind of showed the power shift within the band from it being because Mark was only going to be he was going to be the guitarist originally. Martin Brahma was going to be the singer, but it just didn't pan out. Mark couldn't play guitar, so so Mark, even at that point, was kind of moulding the band into something that he would be able to control, probably, is the best way of putting it.
And do you feel that was always the way, that there was always a sense of one person having the control over who's in and who's out? I mean, I know I'm maybe bored of talking about it, but obviously it's quite a big thing, and it's probably well documented, but, you know, to hear it from you.
Yeah, that's why Martin left, and that's why Carl left and came back, and that's why other people had left. I think, I would just recognise that Mark had seized control. You know, it was a coup kind of thing, but it proved to be the right thing because Mark was a visionary, and I always say it's a bit like when you get two brothers in a band, you know. I mean, if you've got one really, really hugely talented brother, I'm not talking about Oasis here, actually, because Liam's a great frontman, and he's you know. But if you've got one hugely talented brother in a band with his other sibling, then just keep quiet and let them get on with it and enjoy the fruits of it. But it just, you know, if you look at, you know, and I'm not saying Dave Davies isn't talented, because he is, he's hugely talented, but when you've got somebody writing the songs of, you know, the quality of Ray Davies, you would probably think, all right, I'll bite me. I'd like to thump him here, but I might bite him.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I've spoken to quite a lot of musicians of late, and they have referenced it as like being, because they are a family, you know, and it is like sibling rivalry all the time, and there's going to be so many ups and downs, because that's what family life's like, isn't it, you know? Yeah,
well, I mean, obviously in a band, you end up, it's all a cliche, but the cliche is because it's true, you know, you just end up being locked in a van with somebody for weeks on end, and it was a great thing, again, no name, no patch drill, but a mate of mine was in a band, a successful band, and they split up, and he said to me, he said it got to the end of it, whereby it was one of those where it was like, and do you know what? I ate the way you eat apples. And it's like something that I've been winding him up for years and years, but thought he's too petty to mention it. But now the time has come, and my cards on the table. I ate the way you eat apples.
It's like,
you know,
marriage.
Yeah. So I mean, that's part and parcel of being in a band, isn't it? You know.
Do you look back at those days with fondness?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very proud of what I did with the Fall. And like I say, I was in for nearly 5 years, and I started out just being in awe of it. Then I ended up being quite a large contributor to the music and everything, because Martin Brahma left, and me and Craig started writing all the stuff originally, and then Steve wrote more. But everybody will have their own view on what happened. But I did kind of end up a little bit as the shop steward, you know, and there was a lot of disquiet in the band and lots of umming and ahhing and frassum grassum, you know. And we lived, Steve and I lived in South Manchester. Craig lived over in Gorton. Mark and Kay Carroll, his partner and manager of the band, lived in Prestwich, and so we'd all herd over there once a week to get our 10 quid wages, you know. By the time you got back home, you had a £5 left because you'd been to the pub and your bus fare. That was the reality of it, you know. And so if ever there really was any kind of confrontation, it would be from me. It's just the way it was, you know, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And so what I think at least one factor within the relationship between Mark and I kind of freezing over was just the fact that he probably just thought I could do without this shop steward banging on my door and trying to get what the other musicians in the band thought that they were worth, you know.
And also, but at that point, you weren't a 16-year-old kid anymore.
No, well, I got kicked out when I was 21.
Yeah.
And the story is the romantic story that Mark often had flights of fancy, but the way that he always portrayed it was that he rung me on my wedding day and said, "Oh, I believe you just got married. Congratulations, you're sacked." But that isn't the case. We got married on Christmas Eve, me and Trace, in '82, and it was early January '83 when he rung me.
Where do you think stories like that come from then?
Mark, it just...
Oh, it was from Mark?
He was from Mark, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it just made him look like,
yeah, of
course.
course.
Like the real...
It's obviously it's the power game again,
like a
isn't
Shakespearean character, just the Night of the Long Knives, But it was a lot... the irony was that I think it was Steve... It was a day that Steve Hannah got married that he did ring me, and he rung me at Steve's house, and Steve said, "Mark's on the phone for you." I'm like, "Is he? Right, okay," because we didn't invite Mark to my wedding. Steve didn't invite Mark to his either.
Right.
So, and then Mark was on the phone. Just said, "Oh, I'll meet you tomorrow in the pub." And so we met in the Lasagari on Princess Street in Manchester. And he said, "Oh, we're going to go to Europe without you. And if it doesn't work out, we'll call you." Like, "Will you?" "Right, okay, that's good of you, So that's how it transpired. But yeah, Mark often would, manipulate stories into a place that made him look a little bit kind of like Machiavellian or like a Shakespearean character or something.
Do you reconcile anything before he passed away?
No, it was a weird one really, because it was probably about 1987, and a mate of mine, I was working on a comic called Oink, a kids comic, and
I used to work in a news agent in Blackpool, and I used to read Oink. Because it was quite top shelf. It was like, you couldn't have it, so I used to
top
take
shelf?
it. Well, it was for the kids. It wasn't down with the Beanos, was it?
It was like a kiddie version of Viz, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it was cheeky and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and lots of spots and poo and stuff like that. But one of the guys who worked in the office with me, it was his birthday, and he had it at Archie's Bar. I don't know what it's called now, by Oxford Road Station.
Right.
And it's on 2 levels. And at one point, Mick came up to me. And so there'd been a lot of bitching between Mark and I in the press. And it had died down. We've kind of lost interest in each other, really. And he said at that point, "Mark Smith's downstairs. He'd like to have a pint with you." So I was like, "Yeah, life's too short." So I went down, half an hour with him, a couple of pints, got on really well, and it was like, right, okay, great, that's done. And then around about maybe 3 months later, they reissued on his own label all of the albums that I'd been on and written material for. So I rung him up and just said, "Oh, right, hi Mark, you doing?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Are you?" Yeah. "I see you're releasing those 4 albums with me on. Am I going to get any royalties?" "No, you're not."
No.
And it was off again, then back to square one. But he had a lot of mischief in him, Mark. He was a brilliant character, and I'm a massive fan of his work. And of course, if you've got a band going for that long, you're going to have peaks and troughs. Some of the 4 albums were shockingly bad. Some of them were just game changers. In just my opinion.
No.
But I think the truth of the matter is that, particularly when I went to Radio 1, I was just like a ghost following him round. I believe that he passed a massive, I can't say I blame him, a massive billboard with me and Radcliffe on when we'd just taken over the Radio 1 breakfast show, and I can't remember what the story was, but I know that he was really like, "Oh God, it's him," kind of thing. Like, can I not escape this man? And so I never went away, you see, and I think that kind of bothered him a bit. But the funny thing is that when he sat down, he said, "I heard we had an album called Gross out," and he said, "I've heard your first 2 albums, and I think they're brilliant," and all this, when we met at that bar. So it was all very convivial and respectful from both of us, But then, it was the dollar that got in the way, sadly, but.
But anyway, this isn't about Mark E. Smith. This is about you. That's what I want to get back to you. So after 21, so you leave there. What do you have a place to go next? What was the next plan?
Well, I immediately got. I didn't get a band together, but Craig and Steve and Paul I mean, to be honest, Steve Hanley, who's my oldest friend, Steve said, I'm going to leave with you.
Oh, really?
I'm going to come with you, yeah. I'm not up for this. And I said to him, you cannot do that. You know, you're in what is still one of the best bands in the world, and what can I offer you? Absolutely nothing. Well, bless him for that. But so Craig and Steve and Paul Hanley, Steve's younger brother, drummer, they played on my first solo record. So I set a label up with a mate of mine who was a big fan of The Fall, a guy called Jim Cambata, and the label was called Intape, which I still don't know what the name means, but that was his name, not mine. But yeah, we put a record out, and then the label got a bit bigger, and we put other bands out. We put Frank Sidebottom Records out, and a band called Yeah Yeah No, Gay Bikers on Acid, Asphalt Ribbons, who became Tinder Sticks,
Do you think that was easier to do back then? To go, right, I'm going to set up a record label?
Well,
because it's all, obviously it's not, this is not my world. So to do that now, would you know if that would be harder?
Well, I mean, it was basically you had to find a distribution company that you could work with. But because I had a bit of a name with The Fall and everything, that wasn't a problem. And it was Red Rhino, who were based in York. Right. So they had a shop, and then it got to a distribution, then it became part of the cartel. And so they were behind us and eventually would back us as well. So the money was started with Jim's money. Yeah, it was that easy. I mean, it just was nuts and bolts. You know, you would hire a recording studio and then buzz off to London, get the record cut, bring it back. It was just, it was very, very doable.
And also probably because you had lots of connections and you knew lots of people.
Yeah. I mean, and also, like, say, for instance, the last Creepers album probably sold about 10,000, which seemed like a failure at the time, really. But now, for a band to sell 10,000 albums is a big deal, you know, because obviously people don't hand over the cash for albums quite so much, you know, with downloads and everything. But yeah, so we continued that for a while and worked quite hard with the Creepers, but it was never The Fall, you know. It was we released probably, I don't know, maybe 4 albums or something, but.
Did you want it to be? Did you want it to be another Fall, or did you want it to be?
I didn't want it to be another Fall, but I obviously wanted it to be a contender, and I wanted it to be something that people would remember fondly, and some people do. But and it never really caught fire, you know. I don't think I was ever really a front man, to be honest.
Were you fulfilled though, or were you still searching for something? Do you think?
Again, I didn't know what else to do really. And I was enjoying it, and we used to go off and we'd tour Europe and everything, you know, and it kept us busy. And I don't listen to the record now. I don't listen to the 4 records, though, to be honest, you know. But I did that until I got fed up with the Creepers, the band. And in 1987, I was supposed to make an album with, John Langford of the Mekons and 3 Johns. And also Gary Lucas from Captain Beefheart's Magic Band, the last incarnation, Tony Mayome out of Peru, Steve Goulding he played with Elvis Costello and all kinds of people. And just as we were going to go to Chicago to record an album, the Red Rhino went bump. Right. It was a terrible time. The whole cartel just went under. So it was all getting very precarious. I'm not sure how it happened really, but it did. And so before that, we just about managed to do an album which is a tribute to Johnny Cash called Till Things Are Brighter. So the original idea was that John would produce it, John Langford, and I'd just perform it. And John very wisely said, why don't we get lots of different people to sing the songs, and you don't have to do it all because nobody likes what you do anyway. And
he wasn't that blunt.
No, he wasn't that blunt. And then and do it for a charity. So I think it was the first fundraiser for the Terence Higgins Trust.
Right.
And Mark Allman was on it, and Brendan Croker, and Mal from Cabaret Voltaire, and Steve Mack from That Petrol Emotion, Pete Shelley from Buzzcock, and that was a successful album, you know. And in fact, I'm probably more proud of that than anything else in the latter part of the 80s, really, because it was considered to be the album that put Johnny Cash back on tracks, you know. I mean, you know, it sounds like a tall thing to say, but it's been recognised that was the thing that even his daughter Roseanne said this album just gave him the will to go on, which is incredible, really, because we used to go and see Johnny Cash at Blackpool Winter Gardens.
Yeah.
And at the Palace, and generally speaking, it was kind of the Purple Rinse Brigade who were there. And, like, we were by far the youngest people watching Johnny Cash, but we loved him. And so we did the album, and then he put him out there to the indie audience, who then embraced him, and so obviously Rick Rubin took it, into the stratosphere. But we originally did this album, which helped give him a bit of a bit of impetus to continue, because he was kind of floundering, really. So that was a good thing, and that was the last record I made, really. Well, apart from the comedy ones, which you might want to discuss, you might not.
I remember listening to them.
Right, well, public apology.
I enjoyed them, as did many people, Mark.
And it was around about that same time that I was working at Oink. And so, again, and that was because I went to school with one of the editors.
And what did you do there at the magazine?
You see, again, just... about talking about not having a plan and being lucky, really. I mean, I wasn't a cartoonist. I was very, very poor cartoonist when I turned my hand to it. But I came up with a character called Harry the Head in Oink, and I basically created Harry the Head because I couldn't draw people's bodies properly. And so he was just a head that used to bounce around, or he had a tuft of hair that his mate would carry him around by. And I had a couple of other characters in there, and I worked in the office as well, putting the actual thing together. But the editors were Mark Rogers, who sadly passed away, Tony Husband, who is... do you know Tony at all?
I know the name. How do I know the name?
Well, he does jobs in Private Eye. He's just an amazing... He's my favourite cartoonist in the world. You will have seen his work all over the place, particularly Private Eye.
Yeah.
And he's also... he lost his dad a few years ago to dementia, and he's done this book about his journey with his dad, which has just gone kind of through the roof. He's going all over the place doing dementia talks and stuff. But he's a brilliant character, and he was one of the editors. And Patrick Gallagher, who I went to school with, and so I just got given the job, and again, and
it's a right departure from what you were doing to that.
Yeah, complete. And we had about 3 years doing that, I think, and we just used to mess about all the time. There was ridiculous pranks going on and all that. It was like we really, really hadn't grown up, particularly Patrick and I.
Yeah.
And so we spent a few years doing that, and then Oink went bump. And again, just by pure chance, he was a record plugger, Tony Michaelides, Tony the Greek. He was known locally. He had a show on Piccadilly Radio, and he had a radio promotions office in the same building. And I just went in there one day, and I said to him, I want to go see Happy Mondays. Can you spare me a couple of tickets? And he said, do you want a job? And that was just as Oink had gone under.
What are the chances?
So it was a record plugger.
Wow.
Which I knew very little about, even having co-run a label.
So what did that involve?
We were regional pluggers for Mute, Factory, Circa, lots of different labels, lots of little indie labels, and you just do the mail out, ring up the radio stations, harass them into playing your records,
right? Okay.
Arrange interviews, do promo tours. I spent a lot of time driving around Scotland with Ian Gillan and people like that, and it was great. It was good fun, and I did that for a couple of years. But then it was because of that I ended up going into BBC North when Radio 5 had just started, and got offered a job.
What's going on?
I know. So you talk about, do you have a plan? Patently not.
No.
At any stage in my career, you could say I've not had the remotest plan, the remotest idea of where it's going to go next.
But what's also evident is that you certainly don't seem to have. Of course, there's good times and bad times, but you don't seem to have not enjoyed a job. You seem to have been really fulfilled and had fun with what you do.
Yeah, just ridiculously lucky. I mean, I had a job in Sale where I still live now for 3 months in a video shop. That's my kind of only proper employment, as you could call it, from leaving school.
I worked in a video shop when I was 15.
Well, there you go.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that was. I got all the videos that I wanted to watch, and yeah, he wasn't scraping coal from the pit face, put it that way. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, ridiculous, really.
So the job at BBC Radio North, what was that?
Well, the story unfolds that I was going in there to Radio 5 had just started, and they were having a new programme on a Wednesday night, maybe a Tuesday night, called Hit the North, funnily enough. And a guy called Quentin Cooper, who was going to be the exec producer on it, he asked me if I would present it because he knew The Fall and The Creepers. And I said, the only person I'd ever done anything as regards radio was I interviewed Iggy Pop for Tony Michaelides, Tony the Greek's programme on Piccadilly. I interviewed Iggy Pop in 1987.
Did you?
That's all I'd done. And so I said, I've never presented a radio programme. I wouldn't know the first thing about it. I said, why don't you ask Marc Radcliffe? So Marc Radcliffe was producing The Organist Entertains for Radio 2 at that point in time.
And how did you know Mark? Sorry to stop you.
Well, I knew him through Frank Sidebottom. He was Frank Sidebottom's keyboard player, and I used to be in some of the pantomimes and stuff that Chris was putting on.
Right.
And also he produced a couple of Peel sessions for the Creepers.
Right.
So I knew him, but I didn't know him well. But I was also taking him records because he was also producing in concert for Radio 1. So I'd take him World of Twist record and say, do you like that? Yeah, I love it. Would you book him in concert? Yeah. So that's how and I'd heard him on the radio previously, a few years previously. And so I said to Quentin Cooper, you want to get this guy, and he's downstairs and he's done radio programs before. Yeah. And so the audition Mark, and he got the job. So that's how Mark got back into radio.
Right.
And then he used to have a woman called Alison Martin, Alison Bell now. Hello, Alison. And she went in every week or every other week to have a chat with Mark about what was happening in Manchester at the time. So you're thinking it's like, it is the Roses and the Mondays and the Inspiral Carpet, all those bands, you know. So it was a hot spot.
But it really was at that point when everybody was coming into Manchester, everybody was taking the music out of Manchester.
People were coming here to go to the university because of what was going on culturally and all that kind of stuff. But for some reason, Mark and Alison didn't connect. And so after maybe 6 months, Quentin Cooper came back to me and said, all right, I know you don't want to present the programme, but would you come in every other week and talk to Mark Radcliffe about what's happening with a lot of the band I was working? Like I say, I was working with the factory bands, so you got Northside, the Mondays, New Order, the Wendy's and all that kind of stuff. And just talk to him about what's going on in the north of England, because that was our remit. There was 5 different shows that came from 5 different parts of the UK, and you had to just fly the flag for your own particular part on your particular show. So I was terrified, but I went and did it every other week. And then they said, yeah, this is going all right. Do you want to come and do it every week? So I was like, yeah, okay. And then it was, do you want to be the researcher? Because you know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right. And then it was one of those situations where the BBC were made to put a lot of programmes out for independent tender, which was when it was all starting, that kind of thing. The government had made them put programmes out rather than keep it all within the BBC to put it out to the private sector. And so Marc Radcliffe and I set up a company to produce this programme, Hit the North. And we got it. And so I ended up being the producer and co-presenter. And then that's when Matthew Bannister heard it and then offered Mark a job on Radio 1. Mark wanted to take me with him. And so we ended up doing the nighttime show on Radio 1 from 94, was it?
Yeah.
I think, maybe. So that's how I got into radio, just pure accident.
And where on earth did the Sidekick name come from?
That was because
I've always wanted to ask you that, and I've never known.
Yeah, no, what it is...
is that a boring question? People ask you that loads.
No, not really. What it was, I used to play a lot of football, 5-a-side, and play squash, and I still play squash a bit, but I was quite fit. And then I did my backing quite badly and stopped playing for about a year, and just the weight piled on. And I remember being in the goods lift at BBC North with Radcliffe just before we were going to go on air, and I said, I'm going to have to shift some of this lard. I don't know where this is coming from. And And obviously he's Mark and I'm Mark. The funny thing is, I had a back and forth with somebody recently. I put up a David Bowie autograph on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he signed it for Mark with a C, Dave Bowie. And he never signed anything like that, but he did it a favour to me because we used to call him Dave Bowie from the Dave Bowie Band. So I don't think anybody else, maybe somebody from the 60s will have a Dave or a Davey, but it was always David Bowie. So I just put it up online. But it was my fan club membership and it's got Mark with a K.
Yeah.
And people are going, but you spelt it wrong, or you spelt it wrong. I'm going, no, all right. What happened was I had to change my name when I was in the fall so that in print we wouldn't get confused. Me, and if I was saying something and Mark Smith was saying something, we wouldn't get confused. And so on this occasion, of course, I'm working with another Mark, which would be slightly confusing. So, and he gave me the nickname, he said, Lardy Boy, I think he said, shuffle off Lardy Boy or something, when we were having a comedic Barney early on Hit the North. And it just kind of stuck, you know. But the worst side of it was I didn't get back to playing football for ages, and I did get a right old belly on me. I've still got one now a bit.
Yeah, you're all right. You're looking fantastic, Mark. Come on.
Thank you.
And do you feel now that even doing the job that you do on a day-to-day basis now, that you're learning and you're growing, and obviously you're discovering new talent all the time? I know you consider yourself really lucky, but are you? I suppose, are you more fulfilled now doing what you do? Do you feel you've found your base? This is what I'm meant to be doing, or do you still feel like if it all went away tomorrow, I'd go and do something else?
Well, I've still not got a plan, so
I don't think you should have a plan after all this.
You really never. I always say I've got a stiff neck from looking over my shoulder for 28 years, you know, because on the periphery of show business, you never know what's going to happen next. But I always say this is the best job I've ever had because, I mean, it is a blank canvas. I pick all the bands, the live band that come in and play for us. I never have to sit there and think, God, I wish I was somewhere else, because I've asked them and I want them to be there. So in a sense,
you've got a sense of control about what you do. It's not like back in the day where you were told to have a playlist. This is you're sort of curating your own show.
Well, the weird thing is now, I mean, Chris Evans has just jumped ship from Radio 2, and there's this rumblings on Twitter about Radcliffe and I getting back together again to do it, you know, which isn't going to happen in a million years. I was talking to Mark about this last night. But all they dredge all the stuff up, you know, that we used to do. And it was, I think some of it was pretty funny, but there's no way you would get away with it now. It was so near the knuckle. The double entendre.
Did you have control then, back in those days in the Radio 1 days? Did you have more control than what you would have had now, saying on that station?
We were out of control. To be honest, I mean, there'd be stuff going on, and like we'd try and make each other laugh, which is fatal, absolutely fatal. So when you're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, you've got to push it further to get the other one to, you know, react to the unexpected. Yeah. And so sometimes we just pushed it too far. And of course, I mean, everybody thinks that I was Fat Harry White, but I wasn't. And they think that because Fat Harry White was like rude and, you know, deeply offensive, so naturally they thought it was me. But it wasn't, it was Radcliffe. And it was actually based on a character that Vic Reeves had done.
Right.
It's online, you can see it. So he did, the way that started was that Jim Moyer, Vic Reeves, did a pastiche of Barry White with that low grumbly voice and a bit how's your father, you know? And Mark came in on Hit the North, I think it might have been, can't remember, it might have been Radio 1. But he said, oh, and he was very open about it. He said, oh, did you see that? And then replicated it. And then it continued. He's like, oh, well, that was really funny. And so I don't know what Jim thinks about that, Vic Reeves. But anyway, but people always thought it was me. And that's why on the very last show, as Mark was doing Fat Harry White, they faded the effect out, so it was just his voice, so you could hear him doing it. But some of those scripts were like, I was going, oh my God, no, you cannot say that. And they were live. So, and there's even the story that the boss of Radio 1 at the time used to make the people in London, the staff in London, turn the radio off whilst we were on.
Is that true?
That's what I was told.
I'd love if that was true.
So would I. Bad influence and all that. But, you know, I mean, obviously we got Kylie Minogue. Again, you see, that was a funny twist, because Kylie Minogue, we got her to do some jingles for us. when nobody was bothered about Kylie Minogue. And it was like stuff like, Marc and Lard. Or Marc and Lard, at least 4 good records in every programme, which really upset him in London. But there was 4 free choice records.
Oh, was there?
There was one every half hour that Marc would pick. And so the rest of it was stuff that we were given to, most of which we didn't like, some of which we thought was all right, and some of which we might actually like, but not much, And so we used to have all those ruses where we'd come out of Usher and say garbage. And then I'd say, what? They said, the garbage, not been in to pick up the garbage. Just those kind of inane. But, and you could see where it was going on.
A nice little dig.
It's just an obvious waving the flag to say we're not particularly happy about playing that. But and that's why Radio 1 had to get rid of us, really, because we were just a couple of cynical old blokes who hated what we were playing, And the cliche being that the audience would be split between people who would turn me and Marc up and then turn the music down, or they turn the music up and then turn me and him down. The 2 different sets of people who liked the music who thought we were a couple of old dickheads. Yeah. And vice versa, And so, there
was also those people that would just tune in just for your show and then tune out for all the other people's shows.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it was a very influential show just because it was... Well, probably because of that, because we were obviously 2 blokes in the wrong place at the wrong time,
I loved putting the radio on and listening to you, also because I really liked it, but also because, they sound like me, and I know where they're from. I'm not hearing all the posh voices or the London voice. I'm hearing a nice Lancashire voice, so I can relate to that.
Well, I mean, that was like part of the problem, funnily enough, with the breakfast show, because like people were saying we don't want to hear 2 miserable northern men. In the pitch black at 7 o'clock on a December morning, and I can understand that completely.
Marc, please continue to not have a plan.
Okay, I'll do my best, mate.
Marc Riley, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, Craig. Thank you.
And another episode is done. Now, I may have said, in fact I did say, I may have said I did, when I announced Marc at the beginning of this week, I said what great company he is, and I really mean that. He is, you never know when you meet people for the first time, if it's going to gel, if the conversation's going to flow, and it really did, and he's someone I would happily spend a few hours down the pub with, or having a few pots of tea and having a natter. So Marc, if you are listening, I don't know if you are, but thank you so much for giving us your time and giving us a great chat. And also, look, if you don't listen to Marc's Six Music show, maybe you're not listening to this in the UK, you just go get it on the iPlayer, download Six Music, 7 till 9, Monday to Thursday, and past at Two Shot Pod, as we say, at it like I'm on Twitter, at Two Shot, past Two Shot Podcast guest Bill Ryder Jones played a brilliant set for Marc a few weeks back. So go back and listen to that if it's still online. Is it still online? I don't know how long they stay for on radio, maybe a month, maybe 4 weeks. It might just still be there. But if it's not, then you missed out. But don't miss out in the future, and do listen to Marc because he is brilliant. Well, massive thank you to you for listening. Oh my God, I'm so tired. I'm really sorry. I'm going to go. This is ridiculous. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Two Shot Pod, patreon.com/Two Shot Pod. No one says / anymore. It's just a slash. That's the Patreon. If you can help us out there supporting the podcast, then we always welcome you with open arms. I'm going to go. This outro is ridiculous. I'm very tired. Big love. I'll see you next week for episode 62. Have a fantastic week. See ya. The Two Shot Podcast is presented by me, Craig Parkinson, recorded and produced by Thomas Griffin for Splicing Block. Our brilliant music is courtesy of Then Thickens.